There comes a moment in every life when you realize that you are not only living a story, you are telling one. Not with words spoken out loud, but with choices, with pauses, with the way you respond to what is handed to you and what you refuse to carry forward. Long before anyone hears your voice, you are already speaking to yourself, and the tone you use in that quiet place shapes how you move through the world. You did not choose where you started. You did not choose the family, the culture, the wounds, the silences or the expectations that surrounded you before you understood language. Life arrived with a narrative already in motion. Some chapters were written with care, others were written in confusion, fear or neglect. And for a long time it may have felt as though your role was simply to endure, to adapt, to survive, to keep going. But survival is not the same as authorship. Survival teaches you how to brace yourself. Authorship teaches you how to stand. Survival teaches you how to avoid pain. Authorship teaches you how to face meaning. And many people live for years, sometimes decades, without realizing that the voice guiding their life is not one they consciously chose, but one inherited through repetition. We absorb voices before we understand them. We learn tone before language. We internalize expectations before we can question them. And over time, those absorbed voices become familiar enough that we mistake them for our own. We confuse conditioning with character. We confuse adaptation with identity. The work of becoming begins when you notice this difference. Identity is not revealed all at once. It unfolds slowly, often through friction, through moments when the voice you've been using no longer fits the life you are living, through discomfort that signals growth rather than failure, through the realization that something inside you is asking for revision, not erasure but reinterpretation. You may have learned to speak carefully, or loudly, or not at all. You may have learned that approval requires silence, or that survival requires constant explanation. You may have learned to make yourself smaller, sharper, faster, or more agreeable than you truly are. These adaptations were not mistakes. They were intelligent responses to the conditions you were given. But what protected you once may now confine you. The voice you become must be chosen consciously, not impulsively, not in reaction, but with reflection. Because every voice carries values, every tone reveals priorities, every repeated narrative shapes not only how you see yourself, but how you treat others. Self-mastery does not begin with discipline alone. It begins with awareness, with noticing the inner commentary that runs beneath your actions, the stories you tell yourself about effort, worth, failure and belonging, the assumptions you make when things go wrong, the meanings you assign to resistance and delay. These internal interpretations quietly direct your life. If your inner voice speaks only in urgency, you will live in constant tension. If it speaks in shame, you will struggle to grow without fear. If it speaks in bitterness, your compassion will slowly shrink. But if it speaks with honesty and steadiness, you create the conditions for transformation. This does not mean being gentle when clarity is required, or soft when boundaries are needed. It means being truthful without being cruel, firm without being rigid, open without being porous. Moral courage is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in restraint, in patience, in the willingness to remain aligned even when misalignment would be rewarded. It shows up when you choose to speak clearly rather than dramatically, when you choose depth over dominance. Life will test your voice, not once, but repeatedly, through misunderstanding, through rejection, through seasons where your integrity is invisible and your effort seems unacknowledged. These moments are not detours, they are formation. Pain will attempt to rename you. It will offer conclusions that feel final. It will suggest that what hurt you has authority over who you become. But pain is a chapter, not the author. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to name injustice. You are allowed to acknowledge limitation. But you are not required to surrender authorship to suffering. Spiritual growth does not ask you to bypass pain. It asks you to integrate it, to allow it to deepen your compassion rather than narrow your hope, to allow it to teach without allowing it to dominate. There is a temptation, especially after disappointment, to harden your voice, to sharpen it into something defensive, to speak from distance rather than presence. This can feel like strength, but it is often a form of retreat. True strength does not require armor at all times. It requires discernment about when protection is needed and when openness is possible. Silence plays a crucial role in this discernment. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as listening. The kind that allows you to hear what is underneath your reactions. The kind that creates space between impulse and expression. The kind that lets wisdom rise slowly rather than forcing certainty prematurely. You are always practicing something, even in stillness. Even in uncertainty, you are practicing patience or impatience, curiosity or judgment, courage or compliance. These practices shape your voice whether you notice them or not. Responsibility for your inner life is not about control. It is about stewardship, about recognizing that while you cannot choose every circumstance, you can choose how those circumstances shape your character. You can choose which lessons you carry forward and which you leave behind. Self-authorship means honoring your history without being imprisoned by it. It means acknowledging influence without surrendering agency. It means understanding that growth is not about becoming someone entirely new but about becoming more fully who you already are. There will be moments when speaking honestly costs you comfort, when clarity disrupts relationships built on silence, when integrity introduces friction. These moments are not failures, they are thresholds. Alignment produces a quiet confidence, not certainty about outcomes, but confidence in direction. A steadiness that does not depend on applause, a calm that does not require control. As your voice matures, you may notice that you speak less, but with more intention, that you feel less urgency to explain yourself, that you listen more deeply, that you react less quickly. This is not withdrawal, it is refinement. Purpose often emerges this way, not as a sudden calling, but as a steady clarity about what you will protect, what you will cultivate, and what you will no longer participate in. Purpose is revealed through consistency, not intensity. The voice you become leaves an imprint. People may forget your exact words, but they will remember how your presence felt, whether your honesty carried respect, whether your strength carried gentleness, whether your silence felt thoughtful rather than dismissive. These impressions matter. You are shaping that impact daily. Choosing a voice rooted in integrity, compassion, and truth does not guarantee ease, but it offers coherence. It allows you to live without fragmentation. It allows you to be at home within yourself even when circumstances are unsettled. Much of this work remains unseen. There may be no recognition for the boundaries you hold quietly, no applause for the restraint you practice, no audience for the integrity you choose when no one is watching. But these unseen choices accumulate. They form character, and character shapes the long arc of a life. You are not finished becoming. That is not a deficiency. It is an invitation. Each day offers another opportunity to listen more carefully, to speak more intentionally, to align more honestly with who you are becoming. And so, as you move forward, consider this gently. When you speak to yourself, what tone do you use? When difficulty arises, what story do you tell? When the world pressures you to harden, to shrink, or to perform, what voice answers back? You may not control the volume of the world around you, but you do have influence over the voice you cultivate within. Tend to it, refine it, let it be shaped by courage rather than fear, by compassion rather than resentment, by truth rather than convenience. The voice you become will guide you long after circumstances change. It will steady you when outcomes are uncertain. It will remind you of who you are when roles fall away. And if you care for it with intention, it will become a source of quiet strength, not only for you, but for those who encounter you along the way. You are still writing, and the story is not over. As you continue to grow into the voice you are becoming, you begin to notice something subtle but important. The world does not always respond to clarity with understanding. Sometimes it responds with resistance, sometimes with misunderstanding, sometimes with silence. And in those moments, the temptation is to question yourself, not thoughtfully but harshly, to wonder whether speaking honestly was worth the discomfort it created. This is where many people begin to retreat, not because they lack strength, but because they mistake peace for agreement. They confuse harmony with alignment. They assume that if clarity costs them approval, then clarity must be wrong. But growth often disrupts what was built on accommodation. There is a difference between being considerate and being self-erasing. As your voice matures, you may find that some relationships shift. Not dramatically, not always painfully, but subtly. Conversations change tone. Expectations change shape. Some people will adjust. Others will resist. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that something real is happening. The voice you become cannot be built entirely around being understood. If it were, it would never develop the strength required to speak truth when understanding is delayed. Moral courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to speak anyway, with humility and care, even when outcomes are uncertain. You will not always know the right words. Sometimes clarity comes after speaking, not before. Sometimes wisdom is refined through reflection, rather than delivered perfectly in the moment. Allow yourself room to learn, to revisit, to grow. Rigidity is not strength. Openness is. Self-mastery includes the ability to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it through noise, to allow complexity without panic, to remain present when answers are incomplete. This kind of steadiness is deeply countercultural. It does not draw attention, but it creates trust. Trust begins internally. If you cannot trust yourself to reflect honestly, to admit when you are wrong, to revise when necessary, your voice will carry tension. But when you cultivate integrity within, your words begin to rest on a solid foundation. They do not need to persuade aggressively. They do not need to dominate. They carry weight because they are grounded.
Your inner life matters more than your public clarity. What you rehearse privately becomes instinct publicly. If your private voice is harsh, your public voice will eventually reflect it. If your private voice is patient, your public presence will feel steady. This is why inner work is never wasted. It shapes the unseen architecture of your character. There will be seasons when growth feels slow, when progress feels invisible, when you wonder whether the effort you are making internally is making any difference at all. These seasons can be discouraging, especially in a culture that equates growth with visible results. But formation does not rush, it deepens. Much of who you are becoming is shaped in ordinary moments, in how you speak when you are tired, in how you respond when plans fall apart, in how you treat people who cannot offer you anything in return. These moments rarely feel significant, but they are formative. The voice you become is revealed under pressure. Pressure does not create character, it reveals it. And when pressure exposes areas that still need growth, the invitation is not shame but attention. To notice without judgment, to adjust without self-rejection, to continue practicing alignment. Compassion plays a central role here, not only toward others, but toward yourself. Without compassion, growth becomes brittle. With compassion, growth becomes sustainable. You can acknowledge responsibility without collapsing into self-criticism. You can name mistakes without losing dignity. You are allowed to be unfinished. Spiritual growth is not about arriving. It is about deepening, about becoming more rooted, more honest, more attentive, about learning to listen not only to what is loud, but to what is wise, about learning to discern which voices deserve space and which must be gently set aside. As your voice clarifies, you may feel less urgency to convince, less pressure to perform certainty, less need to prove your worth through volume or speed. This does not mean disengagement. It means confidence rooted in coherence, rather than control. There is freedom in no longer needing to be everything to everyone. In accepting that your voice will not resonate with all people in all seasons. In trusting that alignment matters more than applause. Purpose is often quieter than ambition. It does not shout. It does not rush. It reveals itself through consistency. Through what you return to again and again. Through what you protect, even when it costs you something. The voice you become carries your values forward, even when circumstances change, even when roles shift, even when recognition fades. It becomes a steady companion, guiding, correcting, reminding. And perhaps the greatest gift of this voice is that it allows you to remain human, not perfect, not invulnerable, but present, honest, grounded, capable of both strength and tenderness. You are not required to have the final word today. You are required only to keep listening, to keep refining, to keep choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience, compassion over fear. The work continues quietly, faithfully, one choice at a time, and you are still becoming. As the voice you are becoming continues to settle, you may notice a shift in how you relate to time. Earlier in life, urgency often feels necessary. There is a sense that meaning must be proven quickly, that clarity must arrive on demand, that progress must be visible to be real. But as inner alignment deepens, urgency begins to loosen its grip. You start to sense that what matters most unfolds slowly, and that slowness is not a sign of failure, but of depth. Depth takes time. The deepest roots grow where no one is looking, and much of what stabilizes you later is formed long before it is ever tested. This is true of inner strength. It is built quietly, through repetition, through restraint, through the choice to remain present even when it would be easier to escape into distraction or certainty. Presence is one of the clearest expressions of leadership. Not leadership as dominance, but leadership as steadiness. As the ability to stay grounded when others are unsettled, to listen when others rush to speak, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This kind of presence is not flashy. It does not demand attention, but it changes the atmosphere of every space it enters. People feel it before they understand it. You begin to realize that influence is not always measured by visibility. Some of the most shaping voices in your life may never have spoken loudly or often. They influenced you through consistency, through integrity, through the quiet reliability of their presence. In this way, leadership becomes less about direction and more about example. The voice you become teaches even when you are not trying to teach. This is why the cultivation of your inner life matters beyond your personal well-being. It affects how others experience safety around you, whether they feel heard, whether they feel respected, whether they feel rushed or welcomed. Your tone, your pace, your attentiveness, these communicate values more clearly than any declaration. Endurance plays an important role here. Not endurance as endurance alone, but endurance with meaning. There will be seasons when you do not see immediate fruit from the work you are doing internally, when effort seems disproportionate to outcome, when faithfulness feels unnoticed. These seasons can tempt you to abandon the practices that have been shaping you. But meaning often matures beneath the surface. Endurance without meaning can harden. Endurance with meaning deepens. It expands your capacity. It strengthens your empathy. It refines your voice so that it carries both gravity and gentleness. Over time, this kind of endurance allows you to hold joy and sorrow in the same hands without collapsing under the weight. The voice you become learns how to speak in seasons of loss, not with platitudes, not with certainty that bypasses grief, but with honesty that honors pain without surrendering hope. This kind of voice does not rush healing. It respects the pace of the human heart. You may find that as your voice deepens, you are less interested in being impressive and more interested in being faithful. Faithful to your values, faithful to your relationships, faithful to the work of becoming someone you can live with. Faithfulness is not glamorous. It rarely trends, but it builds trust over time. And trust is one of the most enduring forms of influence. Legacy begins here, not in accomplishments alone, but in the kind of presence you leave behind, in the way others speak to themselves after being around you, in the courage they find, because you modeled integrity without demanding attention for it. The voice you become does not need to be remembered by name to be remembered by impact. This understanding shifts how you define success. Success becomes less about accumulation and more about alignment, less about recognition and more about contribution, less about control and more about care. It requires attentiveness, it requires patience, it requires the willingness to be affected without being overwhelmed, to remain open without losing center. As your voice matures, you may notice that you are more comfortable with complexity. You can hold contradictions without anxiety. You can acknowledge uncertainty without panic. You can accept that growth includes tension, and that clarity often arrives gradually rather than suddenly. This comfort with complexity is a sign of wisdom. It reflects an inner life that is no longer threatened by ambiguity, that trusts the process enough to remain engaged even when answers are incomplete. There will still be moments of doubt, moments of fatigue, moments when you question whether the quiet work you are doing matters. In those moments, return to the simple practices that have sustained you. Reflection, honesty, listening, rest. Rest is not retreat, it is restoration. It allows your voice to remain clear rather than strained. It prevents strength from becoming rigidity. It reminds you that worth is not earned through constant output. The voice you become is shaped not only by what you do but by how you pause. In a world that rewards speed, choosing slowness is an act of resistance. In a culture that prizes certainty, choosing humility is a form of courage. In an environment that encourages reaction, choosing reflection is leadership. These choices may not be celebrated, but they will shape you. They will deepen your presence. They will refine your voice. And over time, you may find that others begin to trust your steadiness. Not because you have all the answers, but because you remain grounded when questions arise. Because you do not abandon your values when pressure increases. Because you speak with care even when emotions run high. This is the quiet authority of alignment. You are not becoming louder. You are becoming clearer. You are not becoming harder. You are becoming steadier. You are not becoming more impressive. You are becoming more true. And this truth does not demand attention. It simply stands. The voice you become continues to unfold, not as a finished product, but as a living practice. One that invites reflection rather than performance, presence rather than posturing, courage rather than control. You are still shaping it, with each choice, each pause, each act of honesty, and the work continues.